part of the new Forester Hybrid family of SUVs. More at Subaru.com/Forester Hybrid. This is NPR.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. MaryCariola.org.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made in June 2019 when a man named Roger received some news that he says changed his life forever. Roger considered himself a healthy 35-year-old man. He was enjoying his marriage, a successful career, and good health, only going to the doctor when he was sick. But that year, some blood work showed that his A1C was elevated. He was shocked. Writing for the American Diabetes Association, he said, quote, "Diabetes is something you get when you're old, right?" He said he felt fine. He didn't revisit the blood work issue for another 9 years. But over that time, his A1C continued to increase. He said he made excuses. He was eating too many Oreos. His wife, who craved them while she was pregnant. That's what he blamed for a while. But things got worse. He noticed some vision changes. He was excessively thirsty. He says he was extremely fatigued. And then, June 11th, 2019, he was diagnosed with diabetes. Rogers is one of 1 in 10 Americans with the condition. What do patients and families need to know about the latest in treatment for type 2 diabetes? That question is the focus of an upcoming program at the Rochester Academy of Medicine. Experts say that without effective management, the condition can result in serious complications, including blindness, kidney failure, heart disease. This hour, our guests are going to help us understand the condition, how to manage it, what's new when it comes to research and treatment. It's a good chance to have some of your questions answered as well. And we can do that in multiple ways this hour. You can call the program toll-free. It's 844-295-TALK, 844-295-8255, 263-WXXI if you're calling from Rochester, 263-9994. You can email the program, connections@wxxi.org, connections@wxxi.org. You can join the chat if you're watching on the WXXI News YouTube feed, where we are broadcasting. We are on every day there, and it would be great to have you there as well. Let me welcome our guests who are with us in studio. Naeem J. is with us, a local resident with type 2 diabetes. Thank you for being here, Naeem.
Thank you for having me, Evan.
Also with us next to Naeem is Deborah Ajole, who is a local resident with type 2 diabetes. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
And welcome as well in studio. Hello, Doctor. It's nice to have a board-certified internist. I think we've got Suki Ajole as well with us here. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And Doctor, thanks for making the time. And on the line is Dr. Benjamin Gigliotti, who is a professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of Rochester Medical Center. Dr. Gigliotti, welcome to you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
The event coming up is Wednesday, starting at 6 p.m. Type 2 diabetes, treatments, tips, and tools for patients and families. It's happening at the Rochester Academy of Medicine on East Avenue. It is free. It is open to the public. We will post a link for registration in the show notes on our website or wherever you find this show in podcast form later. So they would love to see you on Wednesday evening starting at 6 p.m. It's a great resource for anyone with questions, maybe a new diagnosis, questions about their own health or loved ones. And that is very common because Dr. Ajole, we know millions of 36 million plus Americans have diabetes. Is that right?
Yes, it's a major issue affecting America, affecting Rochester, and right now, to me, it's one of the biggest silent killers that's really affecting our health of our nation.
Why do you put it that way?
It has its tentacles in a lot of different diseases that play out in the human body, and it can creep up at a marathon's pace at times and really affect people unknowingly until it's tough to do stuff about it.
Type 2, much more common than type 1, yes?
Type 2, much more common, much more seen in adults, and it's primarily driven by insulin resistance and the lack of active insulin sensitivity that our organs are seeing.
The numbers I've got here, so I said 36, I think it's around 38 million Americans. It's roughly 1 in 10. I mean, that's maybe even a little bit more than that. That is pretty remarkable. And more than 90% are in that type 2 category. Now, Dr. Ajole, most develop in people age 45 or older, but more children, teenagers, and young adults are developing type 2 diabetes than in the past. Developing or diagnosing, or, I mean, how do we kind of differentiate? Are we diagnosing it more often? Are we looking for it more? Are more people who are younger than 45 ending up with type 2? What's going on?
I think there's a shift in lifestyle that is driving our youth to have more of cases that are being represented. Type 1 diabetes is primarily where you're just not making insulin, but then there's a whole host of younger adults that are being diagnosed, and a large link to that is seen with obesity, lifestyle, lack of activities. All these things can be tied into why we're seeing an increased prevalence.
And I know, and I'll ask you and your colleague, Dr. Gigliotti, about this. I know it can be sensitive. We've had conversations in past years on the show, and I've talked to people I know who felt blamed or felt like, this is a hard one because I feel like the medical system's yelling at me for this condition, and nobody wants a condition like this. Or so, how do you walk the line of making sure people understand that? Yes, obesity or being overweight can be an issue. Yes, being physically inactive or less active can be an issue, that there are ways to maybe address this while keeping people in the room or coming back to you and not feeling either judged or pushed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think as a physician, sometimes we can get too bogged into looking at the data and seeing how glaring of an issue it is, and sometimes lose that sense of humanity that we all need, that tender, loving care that we all need. I think the system at large, too, kind of puts constraints on us as physicians and providers, limiting our time to really get that quality of care, quality of relationships with our patients. And but ultimately, we're trying to scream from the rooftops, like, this is something that you can do. This disease is coming, and we're trying to help. There's a lot of great physicians out there, great providers out there that are really just trying to get that knowledge and that information out to the public.
So let me ask your colleague, Dr. Gigliotti, why do you think we're seeing more cases of type 2 of all ages?
I think a lot of it comes down to lifestyle and weight, just as my colleague said, but much of that too is better access to care, people going to the doctor more often, better use of this A1C, which you mentioned earlier, as a screening test. And I think people are just more aware of it. So I think it's a combination of seeing more diabetes because more is out there, but also us getting better at detecting it and hopefully, ideally, detecting it earlier.
Doctor, how do you work, Dr. Gigliotti, with patients who might feel hesitant to talk about this or to even want to get diagnosed or to feel judged? How do you navigate that?
As a professor, I spend a lot of my time thinking about the underlying biology of diabetes and of many different endocrine conditions. And I think understanding that can help put it into perspective. So insulin resistance, the idea that our pancreas, an organ in our abdomen, makes insulin, which is our body's main hormone that can control blood sugar, that is part of the equation, and that weight, lack of physical activity, suboptimal diet high in carbohydrates, so these are things like sugars or carbs like in pasta or breads. Having a lot of that can raise sugar in the body, but in general, our body is fine-tuned to release enough insulin to be able to bring those sugars levels down so that our body can use it. And I think the key point is that while people have control over sugar and carbohydrates and their activity, the amount of insulin that the pancreas produces is not something that people can necessarily have control of. There are very strong genetic factors, and type 1 diabetes is because of an autoimmune disease of that pancreas killing those cells. So much of diabetes, there are things you can control, but to a certain extent, like many other diseases, there are genetic factors that are out of somebody's control and something that nobody should blame themselves for.
Well, let's listen to a couple of stories here. Naeem and Deborah are here to share their stories, and we're going to address a number of things as we learn from not only their stories, but the latest in research. We're going to talk about understanding what prediabetes means. You might have seen some ABC News reporting last month about a new oral pill, and there's always a lot of hope for things like that. So we'll talk about everything related to this hour and answer any questions listeners have. Naeem, I'm going to give you some time to tell your own story here and take us back to the beginning of you of understanding diabetes in your context.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Evan. Thank you.
Yeah.
So in terms of my my experience with diabetes, I had the opportunity to sort of take care of a loved one. My mother, who has passed, she had diabetes, and she was diagnosed when I was born with gestational diabetes. And unfortunately, like hearing the story that the doctor was talking about, and even the story that was provided earlier, it is a silent killer. And she was much of a hard worker, and she didn't necessarily go to the doctor often, but she took care of the family household. 10 years later, her diabetes that was thought to have gone away stayed, and it attacked the kidneys. It basically made her lifestyle like horrible. And then after about like another 10 years, she passed. So I was there. I was able to sort of like take care of her and witness and see what diabetes does, how to manage it, how to maintain it. And surprisingly, about 4 years ago, I had sort of a similar episode where, like was said, started getting really thirsty, started being very fatigued. And I live a regularly normal lifestyle. I'm just like 33. So I'm 33 now, or will be in a few days. Birthday's coming up. And yeah, went to the doctor, and then the whole world sort of changed, flipped on its head. My blood sugar was over 500. The doctors was like, "Why are you driving? How did you even get here?"
Wow.
And it was very surreal. That's when I sort of got exposed to sort of like the whole nature of diabetes, A1C, but I still had the experience to be able to sort of get a head start of know what to sort of mess with. And again, like with diet, with exercise, even genetics, if not managed, it comes, and if not even addressed, it can slowly deteriorate you.
So that was 4 years ago?
Yes.
And so now, how are you doing?
I'm great. Diabetes is tough. And yes, there is some sort of, underlying blame, if not shame. But on the other hand, like it can be controlled, but it is tough. My A1C is great. I'm at a point with my doctors where I'm only taking a little bit of insulin, and I'm also taking another medicine, which is sort of like, I forgot what it's called, but Ozempic or Ozempic adjacent, to sort of maintain, again, how my body handles insulin and hunger and all of that. And I'm also just very active. It's like you said, or like what was said, like I'm young and I'm healthy, I'm active. Where did it come from? But you can't necessarily point fingers and blame about like where it happened. It's what you do now. And literally everything I do is in a way to try to mitigate that.
So what has changed most for you in terms of your habits in 4 years?
Absolutely. What changed most for me is sort of my relationship with food and diet. Just for what's acceptable, or not acceptable, what's accessible. Like when you think of food, you think of fast food, you think of anything, it's always hiddenly like packed with carbs, with sugars. And if left unchecked, if you don't think about it, you just consume. Like, even if I'm eating moderately, if you go to any fast food restaurant, you're getting burgers and fries and maybe like a drink. If not mindful, the drink has a ton of sugar. The fries is all carbs. The bread is all carbs. I've definitely stayed away from that. I now mess with sort of lettuce wraps if I want a burger or anything. In terms of any type of beverage, I'm only drinking water, unsweetened iced tea, or some type of like fruit mixed beverage where some flavor, but it's primarily water to cut down on that sugar intake. And I avoid pasta and carbs and breads like the plague.
Oh, what's been the hardest sacrifice for you?
The hardest sacrifice is what do you ever call it a sacrifice? I would say I love baking. I love sweets. And in some way, like, I try to still engage with it because I have to be able to, I guess, what other folks have called like live. Like if you want to go to a birthday party and they're having a birthday cake, and it's like, do you want to just like not have a slice of cake? Not to say you should eat slice cake if you're diabetic, but still in moderation. So what do you do in that situation? What I do is I will have, if anything, like a fourth of what we would call a normal portion, just a little bit.
Okay.
Just to have the taste of it, but I'm not necessarily craving the sweets. Yeah. Ice cream's great. I know everyone loves a little bit of ice cream, if anything, but it's all in moderation. So I would say my biggest is that cutting back, but the sacrifice is sort of like the reconstruction of diet. Like I guess a good sacrifice. I love cereal. A good bowl of cereal in the morning is great. Honey Nut Cheerios, all of those. Can't have it anymore. Haven't had cereal in years because that is honestly just packed with carbs.
What have you replaced it with breakfast?
Breakfast, I would honestly replace it with. I have replaced it with more healthier options. So like your eggs, your veggies, your fruits, if anything, just like more balanced nutritional breakfast.
Yeah, and so you mentioned even if you're going to take a piece of cake, you're going to get a fourth of what maybe other people are grabbing or what you used to grab.
Yeah.
How much in the last 4 years have you become more attuned to just the size of portions that we as a society eat?
Very attuned. If not, it's been a night and day shift, like 100%, 200%. It's constantly on my mind because unfortunately it's linked to my mortality. If left unchecked, like what am I going to do? So I've been acutely aware and always searching for answers with those types of things. You know, what do I not engage with it, or if I do engage with it, which will it affect my body? Luckily, with technology, I actually have a Dexcom like G7 in my arm, which is a little monitoring device for your blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to really understand and see if I do eat food in a couple of hours or minutes, how will it affect my blood sugar? So if I am getting something and I monitor it,
it's telling you, is it minute by minute?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really great.
And so you're very aware all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just asked about portions because, you know, sometimes you'll hear about, I'm not going to name any restaurant names because I don't want to get sued, but, you know, you hear people say, oh, I went there, it was great. The portions were huge, you know, as opposed to like, well, was it good? You know, like, you know, I got a piece of cheesecake. It was massive. And it's like, okay, I don't know. Like, and there are times where I find myself just eating whatever is put in front of me, whether it's at a restaurant or whatever, I'm just making dinner at home, and then going like, I didn't need to eat all that. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that's in a strange way. I mean, nobody wants this diagnosis, but I wonder if that's made you a more educated eater.
Yeah.
And understanding sizes, portions, what we're taking in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Portion is important. And when you have to worry about sort of the sugar intake and how it affects your body, you become really acute to it. My rule of thumb is I eat until I get full. So until I'm satisfied. I'm not overeating. I'm not trying to finish what's on the plate because I don't need to. So if I am enjoying the food, and again, if it's a portion size, I can always come back to it later. I can always return back to it. Or if I don't like it, I don't have to stuff it down. But yeah, it's definitely being comfortable saying no, or being comfortable stopping when you feel like it and not feeling pressured to, especially when if you pressure it, it can have a negative impact on you.
Now, before I ask the medical professionals here to kind of weigh in on some of this story, because I'm sure a lot of what you've gone through is very common, you also think about your mom and what she went through. And I'm sorry to hear about what she went through. And I know that that had to be hard. How much does that affect how you want to make sure your own quality of life isn't impacted? I mean, how do you think about your own future? You're young. I mean, you're turning 33. Mm-hmm. You're a young guy. And I wonder how you think about your own future.
Yeah. So regardless of how life happens, because life does happen, everything can be a lesson, regardless of how tragic, traumatic, or even great it could be. And in one way, I feel, even though my mom passed when she was young and when I was a kid, like me continuing to live, and even with this challenge of this diagnosis, championing it and continuing to live and thrive is a way to honor myself and to honor her. So, you know, even with the respects of her being a hard worker, I'm also a very hard worker. I'm always busy. But I make it a point to go to the doctor. I make it a point to be in tune with my health, because I know when you don't do that, it sneaks up on you. Regardless if it's diabetes or anything else, it can sneak up on you, and it doesn't wait for you. It doesn't wait for you to have a day off. It doesn't wait for you to when you're well rested. It doesn't wait when you're ready for it. It comes. So it's better to know than not to know.
Well, Dr. Ajole, how much of this story rings true to what you hear?
That resonates, and I hear that so often. I appreciate you telling us your insights and your story behind that. There's so many things to unpack here. Food is a great piece of all this when it comes to diabetes, type 2 in particular. And I really try to stress the accountability of what we take in. Food to me is the original medicine. It's before the prescriptions, and that can hurt us for the good or for the bad, or it can help soothe our soul. And a lot of things that from a restaurant level, they're designed to taste good. And who doesn't love that ice cream? Mine is cookie dough. But I think there's a lot of things in society that encourage larger portion sizes, to heritage, where sometimes we can still hear our grandmothers saying, "Hey, you didn't finish that last
Clean
lick.
your plate."
Clean your plate," right? And so we drown out what should be "I'm full." That little voice that says "I'm full," it gets drowned out by so many things that we might not even be fully conscious about. So that really resonates with the stories that I hear when it comes to the food aspect of how can I, what things are impacting my risk for diabetes or worsening of it.
Sounds like Naeem's doing the right things, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Sometimes it's a little bit of self-reflection is the hardest piece. A lot of these medications that have been introduced to the market over the last couple of years, I think have really allowed folks to have that time to invest in the habits that got them to a space where they want to change. And that's what I'm hearing in your story. And it's not something that's a magic fix. It probably took a lot of reflecting, a lot of minor setbacks, but the get back was probably even well worth it. And you're thinking of your loved one in the back of your mind, I imagine, as far as trying to maintain and increase your longevity.
Absolutely.
That's fair?
That's fair. I mean, hopefully, I want to get past the diagnosis, and hopefully I can reverse the diabetes diagnosis as well. That's my main goal, because it's possible, definitely with type 2.
Dr. Jolie, how often can that happen? Can someone with a type 2 diagnosis get an actual reversal?
Well, once someone is diagnosed with diabetes type 2, you have that with them from a medical side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and that's going to stay with you. But how your body, how you can pivot, and how you can really change the trajectory of how your body deals with diabetes, there's so much you can do to really pivot away from the ills and all of the long-term consequences that you hear about, from underlying cardiovascular disease increases to the neuropathies, the ulcers, the kidney issues, the eye issues. Several of these things are long-term afflictions of diabetes, and with proper management and lifestyle changes, you could really avoid a lot of these things if you stay on the path.
Well, let me bring in Dr. Gigliotti again to kind of weigh in as well here. What do you hear in Naeem's story?
Completely agree with Dr. Ajoli, and that this is such a common, not maybe so eloquently stated, but such a common set of concerns where people are motivated in seeing their loved ones. And I think that diabetes is a uniquely hard disease, and that there's few diseases that you're reminded of every time you eat. I mean, eating is something that's a part of our nutrition, our sustenance, but it's also a part of our social interactions and joy. I come from a Southern Italian background where food and family are critical. And I think that makes it uniquely challenging, whereas for many people with high blood pressure or other diseases that sort of can fade into the background a little bit, I think that constant reminder of diabetes because of the food makes it feel like a full-time job. And so when people say they're trying to be on the path and are working towards making healthful choices, so much of what I try to do in my practice is frame it, and that nobody is perfect all the time. And I think that statement of acting and eating in moderation, trying to make healthy choices most of the time, and celebrating when you can, and not beating yourself up when you can't or when there's extenuating circumstances. So much of this is a long-term marathon and a long-term disease where these complications can be prevented, but it doesn't require perfection or eating salads or lettuce all day. It can be something that can be fit within somebody's lifestyle, someone's cultural foodways, and other things that are important sources of joy for people.
Well, Dr. Gigliotti, Naeem mentioned Ozempic or Ozempic adjacent drugs. It's not at all my expertise, but let me just read for you, and I'd love to get your take here, Dr. Gigliotti, and Dr. Jolie as well. ABC News reporting from last month, a new oral GLP-1 pill, which is used for weight loss, may be just as beneficial to those with type 2 diabetes as injectable GLP-1 drugs. Eli Lilly says its oral GLP-1 pill, or Florglipron, could reduce hemoglobin A1C levels on average by 1.3 to 1.6% and also help people lose up to 16 pounds or on average about 7.9% of body weight. So can you tell us a little bit more about what we are seeing on the medicinal front here and what you make of the utility, Dr. Gigliotti?
It's a really exciting time to be a provider who cares for people with diabetes now because the options we have are just so much more plentiful and so much more effective. Traditionally, many of the medicines we used for type 2 diabetes were a double-edged sword. So medicines that could cause hypoglycemia or medicines that could cause issues with weight gain, for instance. And so the advent of these GLP-1 agents, which act to mimic a natural, actually, hormone in our gut and in our body, have been incredibly effective because not only do they help control blood sugar, but they help reduce cravings, they slow gastric emptying, the processing of food through our intestines, which makes people feel more full. And I think they do that while reducing risk of cardiovascular disease, helping lose weight. And most of these medicines, historically, over the last 10 to 15 years, have been injections, which, when you see how tiny the needle is, I mean, an injection is a scary thing for a lot of people. But they've really made them as minimally painful as possible. But for people where that injection, even just once a week, is a barrier, having oral options is a major, major improvement in our ability to care for this disease and get through that barrier of the idea or the performance of a small subcutaneous injection.
Dr. Jola, you want to add to that?
I think from those reports, it also stated that hopefully by quarter 2 to 3 of 2026, they should have that in more mass circulation. But to the point of how a lot of these medications have been through insulin injection form, that can create a barrier as far as access for a lot of patients who are scared of needles. Refrigeration becomes a cost, sometimes a barrier in more rural areas. And so the pill the pill will provide more accessibility, more reach to folks in need.
We're talking to a couple of medical professionals and then a couple of people telling their own stories about type 2 diabetes. There's an event coming up this Wednesday night. It's called Type 2 Diabetes Treatments, Tips, and Tools for Patients and Families. It starts at 6 p.m. this Wednesday at the Rochester Academy of Medicine on East Avenue. It is free. It is open to the public. They would love for you to register in advance, and they would love to see you there if you've got questions, want to learn more about this. And again, it's 38 million Americans have diabetes, and the vast majority have type 2 diabetes. On the other side of this only break, we're going to talk to Deborah about her own story, and we're going to answer some of your questions that have come in via email with the experts as well. That's next.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson. Believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
Hey, programming note here. It is a Wednesday that this event is happening. It's not this Wednesday. It's next Wednesday, the 21st of May, at the Rochester Academy of Medicine. So next Wednesday, 9 days from now, 6 p.m., that's the type 2 diabetes event. They would love to see you there. And we're going to post information in our show notes so you can learn more, register in advance, and it's a great chance to learn more from the experts. So that's 9 days away. And that's why we're talking about type 2 diabetes today, trying to get you updated on what we are seeing with everything from, yes, weight loss drugs to research, who's getting diagnosed, etc. And let me turn to Deborah Ajole, who is a local resident with type 2 diabetes, who shares a last name with someone at the table here. So it's great to have you here, Deborah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
I think you're very proud of the guy across the table from you.
We give glory to God.
How are you doing these days?
I'm doing fine.
Can you tell us about your own diagnosis?
Yes. This happened almost like 12 years ago. And I was in denial when I was told that my A1C was high. And my doctor said I have to handle certain things. I was obese. My weight around that time was about 185. I used to weigh less than that before. So I didn't want to accept that I have a type 2 diabetes. But my doctor said, because of all the implications, all the health hazard involved, I need to take care of this. It was very serious. So he put me on metformin, which was one of the medication available. But I realized that medication alone is not enough. You have to have a change of lifestyle too. So I got myself into exercise. I used to be very active before my retirement, and with exercise and then modification of my lifestyle, the food intake is one thing. We prepare a lot of food, but I never thought of portion control as part of what could help. When you are full, you are full. And there was also a help from a dietitian that was able to help me plan certain food items that might help with a reduction. So I got myself into the program, the exercise program. I enrolled in gym, in water walk, everything that I normally don't have time for. I was a very active person, and I realized that you cannot do this without exercise, without food modification, and without good adherence to the medication that the doctor is asking you to do. So I started on this, and after about 2 years on that medication, my doctor realized that things have gone the opposite way. So my A1C was lower. Okay, the other thing is with cholesterol, which is one of the concern my doctor also had. When you have that high cholesterol and then you are obese and everything is, your lifespan is ready to go down the drain. So I'm trying to live. I'm trying to live for my family, for my children. I want to make sure whatever they want me to do, I'll do it. So they put me on medication also for cholesterol. But I was kind of, I had some kind of reaction to statins, so which made it difficult for me to take. So I started with those food items, some things I don't normally eat before. I started with that. And my weight reduced by almost 30 pounds. And as a result, my doctor said every time I go to the lab for lab checkup, he was very happy to say, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "I'm following the guideline given to me." Because I understand this type 2 thing is a behavioral problem that needs to be modified. And as a result, if you don't do something about your own behavior, the doctor can give you any medicine that will perform a miracle, but you have to also change that thing that is making you get fat all the time, some things that is making you sitting down like a lazy person, even though you are active, then thinking that you don't need to exercise. All these are all the things that we need to put into consideration when it comes to managing this disease. It's a disease, okay? And it's scary because many people are really suffering from it, but they don't want to accept that it's a problem. They always think in terms of type 1 diabetes. No, type 2 is more, many people do have that now. And with that, you have to learn how to manage it effectively. Every year is a blessing for anyone with diabetes. And when you follow the guidelines, when you follow the recommendations provided in terms of food, in terms of exercise, in terms of taking your medication, I've been off metformin for years now. And for the past 10 years, I've been managing this in a way that I feel good about it myself, even though there is old age, but don't ask for my age, please. There is old age, but I don't believe in that. I take it one day at a time and do the best you can when you are still breathing. So I'm encouraged that there is a lot of hope and there is a lot of help out there, and awareness, a lot of education that wasn't available before for type 2 diabetes. So this is something that is going on in my life.
Well, Dr. Ajole, how do you think she's doing?
I'm blushing. I'm glowing. You're glowing, Mama. I could listen to you talk all day, and I really appreciate you sharing your insights as a patient, as a mother, and as I view my mom, and not in the lens of a physician, but as a caretaker, a soul warrior who has really helped to shine and uplift me. And I've seen the work on the other side since getting the diagnosis. And to what she is saying, it is really a testament to her will. And it's not easy, but the journey is very rewarding if you can commit to it. And so I've seen that firsthand, and I'm just grateful that she's been committed on that path.
Well, and, Deborah, you talk about changing some of your own habits with eating. Has that affected how you interact with others? If you are sharing a meal with people, if they're cooking, if you're visiting friends, if you're out to eat, does that affect? Do you have conversations with others about that?
Actually, you have to live by example.
Lead by example?
Right. If I'm inviting guests, I have to make sure it's something that I personally will eat, that they will love, and I have to prepare it and then let them know that this is good for us. For example, chicken. We all talk about chicken breast. I remove all the skin before I even bake it or cook it. We eat now a lot of salmon fish, which is really good for you. You can get, you don't have to eat it every day, maybe 2 or 3 times in a week. A lot of legume, a lot of beans, you name it, all kind of beans. They're very healthy. The way I cook mine, I have to cook it in a way that is attractive to people. I eat less salt. So if you need more salt, you can always add it. So when I have all this, people who know me, they know I like to cook. So when I cook mine, I have to modify all the things, the garbage that people usually put in the food. It will still taste good. So, and the vegetable. I don't like salad, but I like steamed vegetable. So I do cook a lot of vegetable in my own way without adding the extra butter or all the things that people add. I think some of the things we do has to reflect on how we live. Okay. When my friends come in, they enjoy my food. When I go to their parties, I'm selective. They have a lot of good stuff on the table. But when I take something in my plate, they'll be asking, is that all you're going to eat? I said, listen, I just want to try it. If you're not hungry, don't overfeed yourself, okay? And if you cannot eat anything, don't put it in your plate, because those people spend time to prepare the food. And here we are trying to put something we're going to waste or throw in the garbage. I come from a culture where they always say, oh, there are some children who have not eaten anything for years, so you need to finish what is in your plate. Don't do that. We make children feel guilty when we say that, especially children born in America. They will say, oh, that's over there. You know, but here you want to enjoy every food. So, and then don't serve them. Let them take what they can eat themselves, because we are used to piling heap of food in the plate, that is going to go to waste, or force them to finish it when they really don't have to. So all those kind of habits, people who know me, they know that I'm selective with what I eat. I take what I can eat, and if I pass what certain food, is because I know I'm not going to eat it. So don't feel bad about it. I'm okay.
Well, you heard Naeem talk about giving up his beloved cereals and make some adjustments. Is there anything that you really do miss, Deborah?
Since I changed my habit of eating, I try not to think of those food that used to, like donut in those days. I used to like a donut hole and anything sweet. Okay, but they don't even appeal to me anymore. So I really don't feel as if I'm missing anything. You have to put your priorities in order. It's either you want to live or you want to continue with that bad habit. So it doesn't help me. If I know this is going to continue to give me trouble and to make my life shorter than expected. We have a lot of beautiful things to live for, and I have to encourage anyone who is struggling with that to think ahead of that. Our problems, in some cases, are self-created, and we have to try as much as possible to figure out how to manage it.
Well, there's the story from Deborah and her proud son helping pilot this conversation. I want to turn to some of the listener feedback via email. This is Jillian who says, I like Pepsi. I dilute it with 2/3 seltzer. It works great. So one way to kind of maybe bring the sugar down. We drink a lot of sugary drinks in this society, that is for sure. But Jillian says a few years ago, NPR had a show about the stem cell research for diabetes. And she says they concluded the show with projections for a possible cure for both 1 and 2. Let me ask Dr. Gigliotti, you heard anything more about that? Maybe stem cell research or possible future cures for diabetes?
Absolutely. It's a very exciting time. And I think that's one of the avenues of research that certainly is the most attractive, and that it is a potential cure rather than a management or a medication program, or, as has been said, this multimodal approach where you address it from different angles. So there's a couple of labs that are working on this, and to date, it's still several years, maybe even a decade or more in the future. Things always take longer than they seem, but I think its promise is most in the realm of type 1 diabetes. I think it will eventually benefit people with type 2 diabetes, but I think now, here and now, we have so many technologies, medicines, and opportunities for people to do a great job managing their diabetes, and for us to partner and coach with them to help them do that. Before any of these things, these research areas in the future, my hope is that we eventually don't even need them because of using all these tools we have available to us now.
Dr. Joel, anything to add there?
No, I co-sign what Dr. Gigliotti just described.
Okay, here's Connie, who says, Evan and guests, I wanted to put in a recommendation for bariatric surgery as an option for dealing with obesity and diabetes type 2. My partner was extremely obese and had diabetes and needed insulin. He underwent complete bariatric surgery at the Highland Hospital program, and over the next 7 years lost more than 140 pounds, went off insulin, and kept the weight off until his death at age 80. He never would have lived that long as he did without losing the weight, and for him, it was a permanent non-drug solution. That's from Connie. Dr. Jolie, let me start with you first. What do you make of that?
I think the key here is the weight and the weight loss. Obesity and its linked with diabetes and insulin resistance, it can't be understated. And as you lose the weight, and hopefully that is also with the assistance of lifestyle changes, exercise, etc., it becomes a domino effect of, the better you work out, that actually improves insulin sensitivity and your cell's ability to take in glucose and sugars and the like. Bariatric surgery as a whole, I think, had a lot of fan favor over the last decade or so. That has had a shift, or that's been brewing for the GLPs that have now been the talk of the town for the last couple of years, the Ozempics.
Ozempics of the world, yeah.
Yes, and because people have been losing weight with these medications with a high amount of effectiveness, and a lot of the bariatric surgery, people that would originally be targeted for the bariatric surgery are now first being trialed on the GLP medications with great success.
Dr. Gigliotti, you want to weigh in on Connie's email about bariatric surgery?
Yeah, for the right person, bariatric surgery is an incredibly effective tool at helping with weight loss. And I refer to it just as that. In medicine, so many of our technologies, our medicines, our surgeries are double-edged swords to one extent or another. And so much of it comes down to the balance of risks and benefits. So bariatric surgery can be life-changing in terms of weight loss, but comes with a number of complications too, in terms of nutritional deficiencies and issues around that in terms of surgical complications. But we see so many people where the diabetes appears to go into remission or is much easier to control after the surgery, in part because of the weight and also in part of how they rewire the intestines in some of these specific types of surgeries, particularly the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. But I agree with Dr. Ajola. You know, I think medicine, our hope is that in the future, we look back on surgery, which was so helpful for some people, and hope that it isn't necessary anymore because of these other tools, whether medicine and especially lifestyle change, if those can do the trick.
Let me also get Art in Pittsford, who writes to ask if carbs or fat are more dangerous for people with type 2 diabetes. Dr. Gigliotti?
Sure. I think it's so easy to demonize or angelicize a particular macronutrient. So when we think of carbohydrates, which, by the way, when we say sugar, when it pertains to diabetes, we don't just mean simple granulated sugar, the white stuff you put in your coffee or use in baking. Carbohydrates and sugar are really interchangeable at a molecular level, and carbohydrates and sugars are the same thing. And so fats are also a very important part of our diet. Much of our body needs fat for fuel, just as it needs carbs and just as it needs protein. So rather than there being one particular macronutrient that's good or bad, I try to move away from thinking of them as inherently good and bad, and really getting to the point that Dr. Ajola made, this idea of balance. And actually our lovely patients, speaking of moderation, and that having an equal mix or appropriate amounts of fats, carbs, and protein is a really important part of a healthful diet. So I think fat, too much of it is bad. I think it's part of driving up cholesterol and other issues, but in and of itself isn't inherently evil or bad.
Okay, anything to add there, Dr. Joloway?
I completely agree.
Okay. And Alex wants to know, how do you know if you have pre-diabetes? Dr. Joloway?
Well, there's blood tests that can diagnose prediabetes, and prediabetes is basically the range before diabetes, and it is somewhat of a wide range from a blood work standpoint, but it's very intentional because if we can cast a wide net to try to identify patients that do have risk factors for diabetes, it is so important at saving lives, because once you do get that diagnosis of diabetes, there have been studies that showed your life expectancy can go down. And so we want to do everything we can to try to identify folks right before they get to that, and try to adjust their lifestyles and dietary modifications.
All right, ripping through the questions from listeners. Jane, watching on YouTube, wants to know, is your glucose sensor covered by insurance? For people with diabetes on Medicare, sensor coverage is very restrictive to this taking 4 insulin injections daily. Please clarify if this was updated. Jane meant to say, is insulin, maybe insulin and not sensor. So anyway, is your glucose sensor covered by insurance? And wondering if... if there's any update there. Dr. Ajole?
For most insurances, the standard glucometer that you use finger prick and check your blood sugars on is covered with test insulin strips that check it. Most of that is covered. I can't speak to all the different insurances out there. Naeem did also highlight on a glucose a continuous glucose monitoring, sugar monitoring that you wear as a wearable, which has gotten a lot of attention over the recent years. And I think the cost is definitely coming down on those devices.
Okay. How's that going for you, Naeem?
It's going great. I do want to highlight, like, my glucose meter is covered. I have pretty good insurance because I work full time for a tech company, and but I will say, just managing insurance, managing medicine is such a hard task. Like, now I'm currently on this insulin called Basaglar, but I got a letter beginning of the year saying, hey, sorry, your insulin's no longer covered, so talk to your provider to try to figure something out. And that complication is just annoying because, one, managing your medicine, what do you react to, what works good for you, and you have to always adjust. That's why, like you said, it's not an easy pill. There's no super cure. It's just more of a lifestyle change in moderation to hopefully not have to rely on those medicines because it can be such a factor and it can always change.
All right, less than 30 seconds, Dr. Gigliotti. Bob in Rochester wants to know if glucose levels differ from testing A1C, or are they the same, Dr. Gigliotti?
So A1C is a marker of how sugar-coated the red blood cells are. So it's an indirect measure of glucose. So you can measure glucose through the ways that Dr. Ajole and we discussed, a finger prick through blood and a continuous glucose monitor. The A1C is a test that looks at how sugar-coated the red cells have been. And since red cells live 3 to 4 months, it gives you a much longer window. Sugar can change by the minute, whereas A1C gives you a 3 to 4 month window of what the average sugar is based on how sugar-coated those red blood cells are.
Dr. Gigliotti, thank you for sharing your expertise and for being with us this hour. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And in studio, I want to thank Dr. Suki Ajole. Thank you for being here with us this hour as well.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Ajole's mother, the great Deborah Ajole. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Good luck to you. Naeem J., thank you very much for sharing your story. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Listeners, if you want to learn more, 2 Wednesdays from now, 9 days from now, it's the Type 2 Diabetes Forum. It's happening on Wednesday the 21st, starting at 6 p.m. at the Rochester Academy of Medicine. Tips and tools free to the public. They would love to see you there. From all of us at Connections, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We're back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.